The Vatican as the new Pope is being picked. The successor to Benedict XVI will inherit a number of serious problems, including a church plagued by corruption, sex scandals and a shrinking number of Catholics in the West. Just how will the new head of the Roman Catholic Church face the many challenges ahead? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. As cardinals gather in the papal conclave to decide who will be the next pope, it's black smoke billowing from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel that signals a decision has yet to be reached. It's an important moment for the Catholic Church, which finds itself at a crossroads, hit by scandals and with a number of Catholic faithful falling in many parts of the world. Whoever is elected as the new pope is going to have a heavy workload. So what are the challenges facing the next head of the church? The Vatican has been hit by scandals across the world. The new pope will have to rebuild believers' confidence in the church. Leaked revelations have detailed corruption and infighting at the highest levels of the Vatican. The next pope will have to restore discipline and reform the structure of church governance. A number of people who identify with the religion is falling, especially in Europe and the United States. Pressure will be on the new pope to effectively make the case for the church's relevance to a new generation. And while the church is shrinking in the West, it's booming in Asia and Africa. Integrating local styles of worship will be another concern for the next pope. Well, as we just mentioned, there are some parts of the world where the Catholic faith is growing. Let's take a look at the 5 countries with the largest Roman Catholic populations. With close to 127 million, Brazil has more Catholics than any other country. They represent almost 12% of the world's Catholic population. Mexico is second with over 96 million. That means 85% of Mexicans belong to the faith. The Philippines also has a strong Catholic population with close to 76 million. Surprisingly, the US, which is often seen as a mostly Protestant country, is in fact the 4th largest Catholic country in the world with over 75 million. Not so surprising is Italy, home of the Roman Catholic Church, and 5th on the list with just over 49 million. Joining us to discuss this further are our guests in Manila, Father Francis Lucas, Executive Secretary of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. Joining us from London, Michael Walsh, a papal historian and author of The Conclave, a sometimes secret and occasionally bloody history. And also in London, Jack Valero, Director of Catholic Voices. Welcome to all of you, gentlemen. Father Francis, if you look at all the issues and the demands, it really makes you wonder who would want the job of the Pope and why they would want it.
Well, nobody wants the job of the Pope, definitely. But if you're elected, and we believe that they are inspired by the Holy Spirit, there's nothing you can do. That's your mission. In fact, if you join the conclave, you're ready for anything.
Oh, and what a mission the next Pope has.
Well, I see the Catholic Church as entering a new springtime. But this will be done in hope within misery, glory also amidst pain, because of the problems that and the challenges being faced by the Catholic Church today. I say this because first and foremost, look at the people in the Vatican, just waiting for a pope. We have about 5,000 media people watching and waiting. Why would that be if the Catholic Church is now in the back burner of history? And if you look at the long history of the Catholic Church, it has contributed so much in uplifting the poor, in its knowledge, in the sciences, and up to today, the Holy Spirit has not neglected us despite all the problems. So this we also see here from the Philippines that all these scandals is just a minuscule of the whole totality of clergy or even population of the Catholic Church. And lastly, the population of the Catholic Church is not really diminishing, but it's growing, but not in the areas or countries or nations or continents where it used to be the biggest number before.
Interesting that. Michael, do you think it's an almost impossible job. I mean, how can you fill your remit? You've got to be a CEO, you've got to be a head of state, a moral voice, and Christ's representative on earth.
Well, one of the things I don't think he ought to be is a CEO. The church isn't a multinational corporation. It's, in fact, it's a communion of separate churches. And I think one way of dealing with some of the problems which the church faces is to stop the centralization that is taking place in Rome and has been taking place for a century and a half now, to return the authority and the decision-making to the bishops around the world rather than running it all from the Vatican, which they've done exceedingly badly, as we know, in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, some people say the whole thing should be disbanded. It's ineffective, it's corrupt, it's riddled with sex offenders.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether the Vatican's riddled with sex offenders. I mean, it sounds as though that was a report in La Repubblica, the Italian newspaper, that there were gay circles within the Vatican. But that's not. There's no evidence. There's no proof of that. There's rumours about it. But no, I mean, I think that the.
Should it matter?
I don't think they're not going to. They're not going to. Well, I mean, the Catholic Church has a strict moral code, and it's perfectly evident, as we know, unfortunately, in Britain itself, that many priests, and indeed we now know even a cardinal, didn't abide by the strict code which is expected of them. I mean, the clergy are expected to be exemplars of holiness, and they've been failing rather badly in that, it seems to me.
Jack, what do you make of what's going on and the challenges facing the new Pope? I mean, it's not a job that you can compare to any other job, can you?
No, of course, it's not just a job, it's a vocation, isn't it? And there is no perfect candidate, but there are many candidates there who could do the job, and we wait for the Holy Spirit to illuminate the cardinals. But obviously the man has to be a saint, has to be somebody who knows theology and who can teach it in a very simple way that we can understand it. It's a man who has to inspire us, because, you know, the church is not being made by the Pope all around the world. The church is being made by lay people, ordinary people with their jobs and families all around the world. They're the ones making the church happen. And if we can be inspired by him, as we have been inspired by John Paul and Benedict, then I think the church will grow. The numbers you gave at the beginning, you know, the church is growing overall in the whole world. The church is growing. It's a greater percentage of Catholics now than there were 100 years ago, even of the world population, and it's obviously growing in the places where populations are growing in the world, you know, in the south and in the east. But it's growing, and there's signs of hope everywhere. Of course, there are scandals on the child abuse scandal.
Tell us why you think it's growing in certain parts of the world. I mean, if you look at the church, it doesn't set a good example, does it?
Well, the church is growing where populations are growing, as I said, in the sort of thriving places in the south and in the east. The church is growing, and it's growing very much more rapidly than the population. So I think this is a very positive picture for the church. And in terms of, I mean, I think of the Vatican, you know.
Go on, Michael.
Can I just finish on the Vatican? Because on the Vatican, you know, there's a very small organization at the center of this 1.2 billion strong church, which has 2,000 or 3,000 people working, most of which work very well for very little money. Some are incompetent, and this has been shown through the Vatileaks scandal and other things, and they need to go.
I mean, they're more than incompetent, they're corrupt.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think this has to be proven. I think that there are obviously different levels of corruption, you know, petty corruption. This could happen. In any case, whether they're petty corrupt or incompetent, some people need to go, and Pope Benedict is just too nice to get rid of anybody. So I think it's important for the next Pope to get a grip on this and reform the Curia. But, you know, in many ways, administrations in different countries, the bureaucracies, they also need to be renewed when there's a change of government. This is something the Pope needs to do, but it's not the most important thing he needs to do. What he needs to do most importantly is the project of what they call in the Catholic Church the new evangelization. You know, it's the taking of the good news all around the world, and different countries have different challenges. You know, in the south and in the east is growing, but in the west the church is declining. And in many ways, the message has been heard and rejected. So we need a new way of explaining it, of explaining those doctrines. And this is something that Benedict has taken very, very seriously. He even started a department in the Catholic Church to tackle this problem. And you know what? Most of the people he put in there are the papabili we're considering now that could become pope. So he obviously thought this was a very important thing for the church.
Okay, Michael, you were dying to say something?
Yeah, well, Jack's notion that the Pope is too nice to sack people is, I find a bit difficult to take. I mean, he sacked many a theologian around. He took too long to sack people, it is perfectly true, who were abusing children. But he was ready enough to sack theologians who were teaching what they understood to be the Catholic faith. As to
why do you think he struggled
why
so
is the
much
church growing
with sacking those who were sex offenders? I mean, what was the problem there?
That's not true, actually. That is absolutely not true.
Well, I think
it was not his responsibility to sack
well,
them because
I disagree.
Well, somebody's got to sack them.
Jack, just give me Jack.
Go on, Michael.
Sorry, who's talking now?
You are.
It seems to me that when he was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he was too slow to sack people. Now, what I would possibly agree with Jack, because when he came on, he immediately sacked the Mexican Marcel Maciel de Gallardo, which was a very good thing to have done. I suspect that he was slow, we know he was slow over sacking people when he was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which had this duty. But I suspect it was because they were defended by John Paul II. I think when he was a free man to act, he got rid of them. To go back to the other question which was raised at the beginning, earlier on, about why is the church expanding in the third world? I think the church is expanding in the third world because it's supplying things that people need. And that makes it attractive. I'm not saying that in any derogatory sense. I mean, I think that's what the church has always done. It has attracted people because it supplies them with what they need. It is still the largest supplier of health service throughout the whole world. It's the largest supplier of education throughout the whole world. That's what people need. Obviously, it's not responding to the needs of the people in the West. Rather curiously, you know, you quoted the United States as having, I think you said, the fourth or largest number of Catholics. Well, the largest single religious group in the United States is said to be ex-Catholics.
Okay, Father Francis, Michael raised a couple of points there about why the church is relevant in developing countries. What's your experience?
Anybody's relevance is when you respond to the needs of people. That is very important. But what I can say is, but you need more than that, inspiration. Because especially today, people are no more expressing their thanks or gratitude to the giver. And oftentimes they think that that is your job to help me because I'm poor, I'm oppressed, and you have to defend them. So my point here is there is something deeper than just the materialist perspective of people and humanity. And I think that's one of the reasons why in the West, their faith is being diluted because of this very strong trust on the human side, your knowledge, your money, your power. So and this is actually what Christ was telling us, that that is not the way your faith should work. Second
okay,
is,
and what do you think the religion, and excuse me jumping in here, and the Pope should do now as far as contraception is concerned? I know that this is a hotly debated topic, but particularly in poor countries.
It is hotly debated because what the thinking of the Catholic Church that we are teaching is, and our firm resolve is, the philosophy of contraceptive, and we see this as a disrespect for life itself, conception. So this is a whole thinking of looking at ways and means wherein your main value is your own self-gratification.
But your president disagrees with you and actually picked a fight with the church. I mean, he has won a victory over contraception and imposing a law allowing that to happen in your country. Where does this leave the church? Has it undermined the church?
Well, actually, if you go to history, how did the Catholic Church start in the first 100 years? They were persecuted physically, they were killed, they were tortured in 62 AD. And then after that, the church became the triumphalistic church, where they had all the power with Constantine and Charlemagne and all that stuff. And then later on, through history, again, there was like a balancing of both persecution and triumphalistic church. the authoritarian church. But of late, we see that we have not truly followed what Christ was telling us. So going back to my president and also all the other Catholics who supported the passing of the law, let us also not forget that passage of a law in a political sense does not really penetrate the faith of the whole Filipino. So the RH controversy in the Philippines is not finished. But what I'm saying is, because the law itself is, I call it a hypocrisy law. Why? Because it's not really telling what it wants to do. If you want population control, then say it. There are many good things in that law, but
well, it's also very good in the fight against AIDS. I read something quite amusing. This woman, unnamed, said, "I've prayed before not to have another child, but the condom worked better." Jack, if we take it down to the basics, I mean, should the church be more modern in its outlook when it comes to this?
Well, I think the church has a very lofty doctrine of sexual ethics, and it's in many ways in the West it has been rejected, so we need to explain it again. I don't think it should change. The sexual revolution has liberated some people, but has also caused a huge amount of unhappiness in terms of divorce and family breakup and all sorts of other things. So I think there's a time to look back on it and think, why is the church saying the things it says, and explain them in a new way. I think John Paul II, over many years, he developed what he called the theology of the body, which was a new look at why the Catholic teaching on sexuality was what it was. And this is just beginning to be read and looked at. It's something that we need to look at in the next few decades and understand better. But I think, as a Catholic, that this is a very liberating and life-giving doctrine, which is not understood and perhaps is not being explained properly. But when it is explained properly, many people will come to the church and want to be members of it because of this.
We've had a lot of reaction to this topic on Facebook. David Woody asks if the Vatican is perhaps one of the most corrupt institutions to ever exist. Abraham Ikenpelu says generally these problems exist in every society. Since the church is a product of the society, it is bound to face social challenges and tackle them according to the Bible. But one thing is certain, upon various challenges, the church will still remain. And Williams makes the point maybe they should hire a woman for the job. Michael, will we ever see that?
I don't think we'll ever see a woman. No, well, sorry, we might see a woman, but I don't think it's going to be in my lifetime. Or
but aren't
in,
men and women supposed to be created equal?
Well, of course they're created equal. I'm entirely in favour of the ordination of women to the priesthood, but I'm just saying it won't happen in my lifetime. But I mean, I think, you know, one of the things when political parties say we're not getting our message across, we must improve the way we tell it, I often think to myself, well, it's because they don't want to hear the message that you're telling them, or they don't want to listen to it. The message may be wrong. And I can't help feeling that sometimes about the Catholic Church. After all, we have had this doctrine of contraception, and it has been rejected. Nothing, I think, has damaged the authority of the papacy more than the encyclical of Paul VI on Humane Vitae on contraception. He never wrote another encyclical. He knew his authority had been challenged. He never put it to the test again. That is, I mean, I think there's been a serious blow to the Catholic Church, to the authority of the papacy. One of the things, you know, that we haven't actually talked about in this, but it often strikes me in the parish that I go to every Sunday, at least when I'm here in London. Mm-hmm. The parish that I go to, actually what goes on in the Vatican touches them hardly at all, hardly at all. They don't listen to the teachings. They don't really, as far as I can see, really care about the Vatican. What they're concerned about is going to Mass on Sundays and worshipping God with their fellow Christians.
So you're saying that the church
That's what
actually
them.
plays
Somehow
the biggest role?
Well,
the individual church, the local church?
Sorry? The local church plays the biggest role, yes. And I mean, I'm written histories of the papacy. I'm fascinated by the papacy as an institution. I wish it did relate more to the people in the pew. Mind you, I don't think that we should think in those sort of... I don't think we should think of the church as a multinational corporation, as I may have already said. I think we should think of it as a federation, a communion of local churches with great authority in the individual dioceses. But I'm sorry that the Catholic Church, that the Vatican has lost any hold, really, I think it has, on those people that I associate with. No, that's not saying that they're all liberal Catholics, but I don't think it talks to them. I don't think they're interested in it. But they are interested in their church. They're interested in their faith.
Okay. And Jack, do you think if the next pope is too liberal, I mean, looking at who's in the running, little chance of that, but do you think he might then get swept away by all the forces that he's possibly unleashed?
I'm not sure about the labels conservative liberal. I think the next pope will be a Catholic, and his job is to keep the tradition of the Catholic Church, which is what he will do, and this is what all 115 cardinals are thinking at the moment. I mean, personally, in my parish, everybody is really happy and really following the news about the Pope and really feel connected to the Pope and try to live the teachings of the Church, you know, sometimes not very well, but they try to. And also on Humane Vitae, which I think is obviously a crucial encyclical which marked a change in the Church. I think what's really interesting about it, this is the encyclical on contraception, on banning contraception. What's really interesting is the predictions that Paul VI made about the evils that would come onto the world and the unhappiness and so on that would be caused. They've all come true, and it's interesting. I think people should go back and read this document, which is now almost 50 years old, and read it and see, has this come to be? It's really interesting, that bit. But anyway,
okay.
The Pope...
let me just ask Father Francis something. I mean, when you look at that black smoke billowing, everyone's waiting for the white smoke. I suppose in a way this has been quite good for the Church, hasn't it? I mean, millions of people are watching, waiting. They're excited, they're intrigued.
Yes, they are. They're very excited and waiting because now of the media platform that we all enjoy. And I think one of the reasons here is the new year, the year of faith. And as I always say, that Benedict XVI left a roadmap of documents. And likewise, there are so many documents as riches of the Catholic Church, which are the best kept secret. So it has to really be promoted in a new way of evangelizing, a new way of communicating. All these very rich documents that will inspire us and will really clarify our own humanity and our own breath of the Spirit, quote-unquote, Benedict XVI. And many more people, I'm sure, will come to this, because even in our own experiences, even me as a priest, when I go down as incarnated into the villages and talk to the people, not really preach, but communicate properly with them, their own desires, their own dreams, and even their struggles against oppression and all that, they understand that even despite all the sufferings they go through, they hold on to somebody.
Okay.
They know it's very close to them.
Let me ask Michael a quick question. Do you think Catholics around the world will be having a good Easter?
Well, I'm going to be in India, so I should be celebrating according to the Syro Malabar rite, which will be an unusual experience. Will they have a good Easter? I don't know. I mean, are you referring to whether we have a pope that appeals to people?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I do hope we do. Yes, absolutely. Well, of course I hope that. I mean, who would hope otherwise?
I think everyone's in agreement that it is a crucial time for the Church, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It is really.
Okay, where to...
May I say something?
Sure.
May I say something? Anyway, this just my analysis of the history of the Catholic Church. I said it started with being persecuted, it becomes the triumphalistic church, and this time I think the persecution or the purification will come no more as physical pain, but more on the moral side.
And thanks to all my guests. In Manila, Father Francis Lucas, Executive Secretary of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. In London, Michael Walsh, who's on his way to India. Have a good trip. A papal historian and author of The Conclave, a sometimes secret and occasionally bloody history. Also in London, Jack Valero, Director of Catholic Voices. And thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want, you can send us your feedback. Just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching. Goodbye from me, Jane Dutton, and the rest of the team.
Opportunity. The first essential of success is to create it. There are many ways to create opportunity. You can grow it, manufacture it, or craft it. There are many ways to create opportunity at the crossroads of ASEAN. With all the opportunities of the world's most dynamic economic region, Thailand connecting ASEAN for unparalleled opportunities.
Join the online community with its own television show.
It gives us that platform to be our own representatives.
It's accessible to many people of different backgrounds.
The discussion is always changing.
And it's a workshop where some amazing ideas are shared.
It's mainstream communication.
This stream.
At this time on Al Jazeera.
See the world from every angle and every side. Al Jazeera.
As the Egyptian revolution grew, from sporadic demonstrations to organized mass protest, an altogether different battle began. A regime desperate to save itself, deploying all its tools of misinformation to tell a story far removed from the facts on the ground. Manufacturing the truth, part of the Revolution Through Arab Eyes series, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera is a source of original journalism. We don't follow the rest of the pack.
The smoke and the heat from the fire is just incredible.
We also have a perspective which isn't just Western. It's African, it's Middle Eastern, it's Asian. Al Jazeera gives all sides of the story.